want me to.
And good afternoon. I'm Tracy Sinclair, and we are live at our digital desk, and we are going live to our crew in Nome. We've got Beth Burge and Jordan Rodenberger. They have been on the trail for most of this Iditarod, and I'm so excited to talk to you guys about what it's been like. But first, let's start with the finish, which we're going to see a winner cross the line tonight. Can you give me any idea of what we can expect for this evening?
Oh boy, a lot of excitement, that's for sure. Jordan, I know you've been following the end in particular really closely.
Yes, and it looked like Matt Hall in second place was about 3 hours behind CV leaving White Mountain. So really, it's CV's race to lose at this point. Barring any surprises, it should be Dallas CV into Nome Front Street under the Burl Arch for the 6th time ever. And it will be later this evening, not anytime soon. We're not in no rush just yet.
I guess left, but we've talked about it a lot before. Anything can happen, truly anything can happen. And so to Jordan's point, even Dallas himself talked a little bit about how he needed to really focus. Now he has this plan. He tried to take a little bit of a middle of the road sort of route for this Iditarod. He has a mix of dogs. I know you can talk a little bit more about that as well, but definitely have to be careful because one thing could go wrong, wipe it all away. But a lot of people are excited to potentially see that 6th win.
Yeah, he's not celebrating just yet, that's for sure. He was very focused and intent on getting the finish line with his team healthy. And as we mentioned about a little bit about that team, he told us in Cripple at the halfway point that he didn't necessarily have any superstars on this team, but by the time he got to White Mountain, it sounded like he found his guy, and that's Sebastian. So I look forward to seeing Sebastian and Dallas and the rest of the crew coming in here eventually.
Definitely, and we'll be here for more than whoever is first, right? But there are a lot of people who have decided to go by the Burl Arch as well. We had to kind of shift, so you can't see it behind us right now, but you will definitely be getting quite a few views from there from Alaska's news source.
Well, a quick question as well. One of the things that I noticed as I was sort of watching the trail go along or watching the race, it kind of felt like Matt Hall came out of nowhere. That could just be an amateur's perspective, but that's kind of what it felt like. Is that how it happened?
Well, it's interesting because for how under the radar he was coming into this race, he really should not have been. He is a Yukon Quest champion, which if you talk to other mushers could say is sometimes more difficult than the Iditarod, and a top 5 finish last year. So, and he's only 32 years old with a lot more time to still improve upon his race strategies.
Yeah, and we're also talking about the full Yukon Quest, right? The 1,000-mile Yukon Quest. And I think some people, they may hear 1,000 miles. Oh, Iditarod, 1,000 miles, same. That's definitely not the case. I can tell you, even not mushing out there, that that's definitely not the case. But it's certainly exciting to see that pack having moved around a little bit throughout the race, especially this back end. Yeah, out of nowhere, wouldn't necessarily categorize it that way, but it's been an awesome race to follow thus far, and to see Matt Hall up that high is really great as well. In addition, we've also been following some of those other mushers who have really kind of jetted to the front after some adversity. I know the trail is a challenge in itself, and so to use the word adversity, you're using it a little bit loosely there, but I mean, we mean serious challenges out there, health challenges with the trail, the weather.
Wildlife.
Exactly. Wildlife, yeah, because you were also talking to Dallas a little bit about that, or hearing from him, if you want to explain to our viewers.
Yeah, I mean, it's been one thing after another. I mean, to derail your race in the first day is tough, but he did have enough time to gather and make up for that 2-hour time penalty that he received for not sufficiently gutting that moose that he killed on day 1. But you know, he never let that kind of mess with his mind. He stayed focused and kind of focused on his team and his trail, running his own race, they call it. You know, we're not focused on who's ahead of him, who's behind him.
Yeah, and so just to back up a little bit, I think, Tracy, you had followed this relatively closely as well. Dallas had encountered a moose, an aggressive moose on the trail when he was actually behind Jesse Holmes. And we saw an encounter between Jesse and Dallas in McGrath where they were kind of going back and forth about what had happened. They actually hadn't talked to each other before that. And Jesse was explaining, well, I punched the moose right in the nose. And Dallas was like, oh, well, I was the one who had to deal with it, you know? So I maybe you should have punched it a little harder next time. But anyway, yeah, so Dallas had to deal with that. And as Jordan mentioned, he did receive a 2-hour penalty. That was the Iditarod's decision to impose that. Dallas had said that he felt that that was the right decision, but he did also describe when we caught up with him in Cripple, just this kind of feeling of shock, a sort of fog in a way, I think. He had a dog injured. He had said that the moose actually landed not only on top of his sled, but on top of the dog Falou, and so of course, upset about the injuries to the dog, as he described in Cripple. But initially, he wasn't so sure how serious the injuries to Falou were. He did mention a huge vet bill, but now we've seen lots of posts and heard from him a little bit more about that dog. And the dog is doing super well. And obviously, Dallas CV is also doing super well. So we will see what happens, but it's a very exciting time as we get to the first finish of Iditarod 52, hopefully sometime today.
Not necessarily if Dallas and his squad are keeping the pace that they have been. Again, it'd have to be barring something extreme on the trail, which has happened more than once on this final stretch, as we've seen. Like, he's not even into safety yet, and safety's kind of like a chance to, okay, breathe a little bit, but still not even at that case. So really, if it was just a matter of two teams running along the trail, it would be a lot of ground to gain. I think 30 plus miles behind at this point.
Yeah, and that checkpoint, 77 miles out about, but safety is only 22 miles, and there's actually an award that the Iditarod gives for the fastest trip from safety to Nome. So that kind of gives you a little bit more context as to how quickly that can be run. It's a little race in itself. So I don't foresee us getting that, you know, neck and neck finish at the end. But again, you never know. And Dallas has been very specific to say, look, I'm doing what I have to do. I'm focusing on the dogs, focusing on the finish, hopefully getting his team here all healthy. He had intentions that he had set and shared with us about wanting to get this group of dogs to the finish line. I know he has a lot of young dogs as well. Jordan, you heard him talking about the standout dog, Sebastian,
Yeah.
who kind of came through as this race has unfolded. It's obviously important that the dogs come first, but Dallas is really making it a priority to navigate this last bit and get everyone here to the Broad Arch safely. Well, I do want to say one thing about the trail conditions. Obviously, they're varied throughout the race. You're going through all different kinds of terrain, but Pete Kaiser and a couple of others had made specific points about the trail quality, which is that it can look really good. It can look beautiful, but maybe that white kind of crunchy snow is just scratching the bottom of your runners the whole time, and that's why some of these racers are moving a little bit more slowly. But Jordan, do you want to?
Yeah, you know, of course there's been wind and there's been cold, but nothing like to the point where it's like keeping teams from moving forward along the trail, or keeping teams from even pulling out from the race altogether. And I'm curious as well to look further, you know, maybe post-race we can kind of dig into more about how this all developed, where all these rookies were making it so far along the trail, and they were making it 400, 500 miles before we eventually did see some of those scratches. But maybe it's the training methods, maybe it's the kennels that they work with. Of course, they're obviously training with other mushers in this race, so maybe it's a combination of multiple things between the trail, the weather, the dog care for the teams, and just the mushers' ability altogether.
Yeah, and to go back to the original question about the scratches, Tracy, I mean, there are serious elements that are attached to the Iditarod. You know, we had a couple of dog deaths, which is, it's not only unfortunate, it is so sad, and I can only imagine how the mushers are doing now. You know, that ends their races now, and as we hear from mushers time and time again, appropriately, the dogs have to come first, the health and the well-being of the dogs. takes precedence over everything else, getting to the next checkpoint or what have you. And we did see 2 dog deaths, which those are still being investigated, but those 2 mushers had to withdraw or they had to be scratched, and 2 other mushers also scratched. One of them, Erin Altimus, we had caught up with her in McGrath, and she was so great to talk to, but boy was she tired. I mean, you actually really couldn't see it in her, you know, in her physical presence, if you will, except for the fact that she was kind of just sleepy looking, if you will. She honestly was kind of glowing, if you ask me. But when she was talking about her experience, she was just like, I am so tired. And she also talked a little bit about how her race up to that point had kind of pushed her dogs almost to a mental limit, if you will, or we're approaching that edge. And so she was a little bit concerned about that. She did end up scratching, but she's an experienced musher too. Anything can happen. And Aaron Burmeister as well, you know, he's run over and over and over again, and he has a huge fan base, especially here in Nome. So he may not necessarily be thinking about that pressure so much, but a lot of people were really excited for him to get here. But he talked about, you know, mental health and well-being in general, and so
yeah, the Iditarod can take out rookies, of course, and then even the most experienced like Aaron, 20 plus years on the trail. And you know, one of the storylines with Aaron heading into this was he was carrying Howard Farley's ashes from Anchorage to Nome. Howard Farley, of course, one of the founders of the Iditarod, and was hoping to make it to Nome, and unfortunately Aaron did scratch. However, we were able to confirm through Howard Farley's daughter's Facebook page that Ryan Reddington will be taking over and will be bringing Howard back home to Nome. So that is great to hear.
Yeah, a lot to follow. Obviously, some really wonderful stories coming out of here. And honestly, when you're talking about Aaron specifically, you know, having so much experience, talking about leaving the race, maybe taking some time off, then coming back, and honestly having the wherewithal to be like, okay, you know what, this year, it's just not my year. I'm not fully in it, or you know, I didn't talk to him personally, but hearing some of his comments and reading some of those, making that decision for the better, you know, future of him and his dog team is something I feel like to be applauded. And so scratches can be really dramatic. They can be scary. Thankfully, we haven't had any serious injuries to any of the mushers or the dogs outside of those scratches that we know of, and hopefully it stays that way. So again, we're just looking for that happy, healthy finish under the World Arch here in Nome. Tracy?
And I just want to point out, it has been pointed out to me that while the people in Nome could hear my questions, you could not. We have a new system, but that is fixed now. So another quick question. You guys have been on the trail a number of times, the both of you. What's your experience like? And I was told that I needed to ask about the chase plane. So I'm jumping that over to you guys.
Oh, okay. So I guess I'll go first then, because I was on the chase plane again this year. It's a true privilege to be able to do that. Our news director, Tracy Sabo, and I, and our pilot, Chris Palm, move, you know, from checkpoint to checkpoint throughout the beginning of the race. We did not make it to Rainy this year because of weather conditions. Just decided that wasn't in the cards for Iditarod 52. I have been there with them in years past. But yeah, this year, another chase plane year, and it's awesome to be able to see the race from that vantage point. Some of the other crews are taking different routes. You know, I know Iditarod Insider snow machines the whole way, which I can imagine that's awesome as well. I think we need to get a whole team together where we have snow machines and planes and walkers and whatever else. Yeah, right. So, but the chase plane is one of those once in a lifetime experiences, and we get to be on the ground with the mushers, and then even land in some of those super remote spots. I mean, on the Yukon, for example, and flying right over the mushers on sea ice or what have you. Not right over, I should say, actually, because you don't want to buzz them if you don't have to. But seeing them from an aerial view where you can actually tell who's who, it's super cool. But Jordan has also been to a bunch of these checkpoints for multiple years in a row, and I know that it's a great experience to be able to even go to some of the hubs, especially the finish.
Absolutely. Finish line, always a highlight, but I'll start with the first checkpoint for myself was McGrath, which is one of the first major checkpoints about 300 miles into the race, and it's interesting to see how race strategy develops year over year. You know, in years past, a lot of the front runners would hang out in McGrath a little bit, maybe snack their dogs, hang out for 4 hours and rest, maybe even take their 24. But man, a lot of those leaders just blew right through McGrath, where we did get to hang out with the back of the packers, a lot of the rookies in McGrath, and they're just hanging out, resting their dogs, feeding them, and getting to share some of their stories along the trail. So McGrath, a highlight, and I will also shout out Unilacleet for a couple of reasons. Well, actually, just one reason: the food. The food for a couple of reasons.
The people and the food.
No, the people and the food, of course. The checkpoint itself, there's bacon, eggs, pancakes being cooked all hours, so the food's always fresh and hot for the mushers. Can't forget Peace on Earth, the popular pizza place where people from all over the world order pizzas for specific mushers with little notes on them. That's always a highlight as well. And then of course, what else? What other food was there?
I think there was a large breadth of items from which people could choose. There was a lot of excitement.
Social, that's what I was thinking.
Oh,
of.
the pie social, yes.
The night before teams came in, that was definitely a highlight for me. I may have spent too much time in there. I was supposed to do a story, but I may have hung out and ate a piece of pie or two afterwards as well. But that was great to see Iditarod members, volunteers coming together, and they were raising money for the church in Unilacleet as well. So that was really cool. Yes, shout out Unilacleet for sure. The people and the food.
Yeah, and the mushers made specific points about Unilacleet as well. I mean, even chatting with Jesse Holmes, he was first in the checkpoint, and he was, as usual, quite funny, but he had a lot of energy, and he's like, you know, if Dallas gets here, maybe he'll have some pancakes with me. And people are like, well, we'll see, you know. But Jesse's like, I'm not leaving. I got bacon and eggs and sourdough pancakes and blueberry syrup in there. I'm going in, you know. So took care of his dogs, hopped in. I wasn't able to catch up with him inside of the checkpoint, but boy, was he excited, and I would expect that he was not disappointed.
Oh, I've heard mushers describe it as a trap because, like, it's just so comforting and warm, and the people are so great there. And there's even a dryer and a washer if you need to do some of that laundry as well. There's beds with closed doors. You're not sleeping on the floor or camping out on the trail. It's just a great place for mushers to reset before hitting that coast, because it is that first stop before the last 300 miles there.
Oh, Wally.
Oh, there we go. I keep turning down my mic. 20 years ago, Wally ran his first Iditarod. Now he's back. What, have you talked to him? Why wait 22, 23 years to do this again?
You know, having that kind of a gap is a little wild to think about. You know, we're talking about these mushers who've been racing for 20 years. Some of them are first year this year. And then you got Wally Robinson, who's back after 2 decades. And I mean, he was great to hear from. You know, he's running Josh McNeil's dogs. He said he found out he was going to race, I think it was 3 to 3.5 weeks before the race started, so just a little bit before the food drops. And yeah, 2001 finished 40th out of a finishing roster of 57. So he also was moving up, you know, compared to that. But he's just very excited about it, and also very even keeled. I noticed, you know, obviously fatigue is, I would say fatigue sets in relatively quickly, but these racers, most of them, you know, they kind of have an expectation coming and going in waves, ebbs and flows, you know, of that tiredness. But yeah, Wally is running that team of Josh's, and even though it was last minute, they obviously had a lot of faith in him. And he made a point too to talk a little bit about his daughter, Emily, who just won the Connect 200 this year. She's a multi-time junior Iditarod champion. She's eyeing the last great race as well, of course. But Wally has also been helping her with her venture and her career, which I'd say blossoming, but it's like, I know that it's just getting started, and she's going to have a lot of great things that she's going to be doing in the future, I'm sure, you know, representing all different kinds of parties, including women. So love to see that. And yeah, Wally was kind of a hoot as well, because he's still learning the dogs' names and you know, just working on what he can throughout the race. But he was right up there, and a lot of the other mushers were kind of like, wow, to see him up here is impressive. You know, I talked to 2019 champion Pete Kaiser. He had mentioned you must be good at what you're doing. You must be well trusted with the dog care and everything like that to be in the position that you're in right now. That was in Ruby that he had said that. And Aaron Burmeister, Ryan Reddington also commenting, being like, 2001, you know, wow, little class reunion here. So yeah, it's exciting to see all these different mushers, especially some of those new faces, if you will, which you don't want to, I don't know if I want to call Wally a new face, but he's coming back obviously after a while.
He's a new face to me because obviously 20 years ago, that's before I was covering dog mushing, let's just say. So
Jordan was about to say before he was born.
So I knew him as Emily's dad. That's how I knew Wally.
I love it.
Yes, he was always the first one to greet her at the finish line of Junior Iditarod, the last one to say goodbye as she was taking off, and you could definitely tell that he enjoys like the coaching side of it, which is really cool, and now he's on the competitive side of it. So, you know, you can never leave this sport, and in their kennel, the way they're building that has been great to see as well, and really excited for Emily's future as well.
Yeah, for sure, a lifestyle for a lot of these racers, and I would say the Robinson family is the epitome of that. But you also had a couple of other mushers that stood out to you that you were able to catch up with and talk to and just kind of get more of a lay of the land from their perspectives, right?
Yeah, so Joshua Robbins is a new name to me as well. He's only been competitive dog mushing for like 4 years or so, but this is his first Iditarod, and I spoke to him at the ceremonial start, which felt like so long ago at this point, but he was saying how, I don't know how we even got here, we're hanging on by a thread, but we're gonna do it. And let's just say by the time I saw him in McGrath, that thread was getting thinner and thinner, but he was still in high spirits, still doing his thing, and he is still on the trail, and he is not even the Red Lantern at this point. He's second to last, but he's not even the Red Lantern at this point. And during that ceremonial start and throughout the race, he's been wearing a patriotic jacket with a zipper with the number 22 on it. Joshua Robbins served in the military for more than 10 years, and he described that he had a little trouble getting back to civilian life after serving his time. And of course, dog mushing and this sport has helped get him back into this lifestyle and has kind of changed the course of where he's at. And it's just that perseverance, and one of his slogans is he just wants to prove to everyone that it's okay to fail. Don't be afraid to fail, and he hasn't failed yet, and which has been awesome to see. I really, really am cheering him on to get to this World Arch here in Nome, along with everyone else.
Well, we are very excited, and once again, because we've got a number of people that have joined us on Facebook and on YouTube, and of course on our live stream on alaskasnewssource.com. Any idea about when we expect the first musher to cross? We are expecting at this point, unless something changes, that it will be soon to be 6-time champion Dallas Seavey, 5-time champion right now. Any idea about when we think that first musher could cross under the World Arch?
Well, we continue to do those math problems that we learned in school where you take X and times Y
Put
and
a little plus sign.
Because you got to multiply the miles per hour they're going, which you have to average it out, and then how many miles out they are. And doing the math before we hopped on here, it was about 6-ish, and about 6 o'clock in the evening. So it could be during the live broadcast.
Yeah, it could be during the live broadcast, so you definitely want to tune in for that. But along with the winner, whoever it may be, we'll be following along too with the mushers behind the lead pack as well. And again, we've talked a little bit about this, but just those different storylines coming out of this race. There are some dramatic moments, obviously, and some things that we wish we wouldn't have had to have seen, but there are a lot of moments that stand out as celebratory ones. Now, the finish line, that one hasn't happened yet, but we're looking forward to it. Dallas Seavey currently in the lead by, a couple hours as of last check, but that pack right behind him is full of people that we are also looking forward to welcoming here in Nome.
Very exciting, guys. That is Beth Verge and Jordan Rodenberger from in Nome, and we will have the live finish tonight on KTUU, and very possible it could be during the 6 o'clock news. So you'll want to stay tuned to Alaska's News Source and, of course, our streaming platforms, because we will spread the word far and wide when we start to get that first musher across the line. Thank you so much for joining us, and keep watching on alaskasnewssource.com and check out our streaming platforms as well. Have a great day.